Hi, it's Adrian. It's January 1st, 2021, and let's hope this year is better than 2020. Stay tuned, I'm gonna show you how I feed all of my worm bins. Happy New Year's. It's January 1st, 2021. Finally done with 2020. All right, so I figure it's time to check up on my worms, see how they're doing. These are used coffee grounds that I got from Starbucks. They give away their coffee grounds. When they do save you the coffee grounds, that does come with coffee filters in there as well, which is all right because your worms will eat that. Initially, when we set this up, I used shredded paper at the very base, and I have fed this a few times since I first set it up. Now I'm gonna go through and just kind of see the overall health of the bin. I'm gonna look for the worms, how fat they are. They're nice and fat and happy. This guy right here is looking good. It's fairly cold this morning, so I don't think they're too active. I try to feed my worm bin about once a week. I'll come through and I'll check on them, see how the worms are doing. If they're trying to escape, that means it's probably too wet and there's not good airflow. So I see if I have lots of worms all around the edges trying to crawl out of the bin. If they are, then you need to fix something. You can either add in shredded paper or some kind of like cardboard, a carbon source, which will help suck up some of that moisture. And then you need to look at how your bin is being ventilated. For me, because I'm inside in a controlled area, I just have a piece of Panda plastic on the top, which allows it to stay moist and breathe. That's why I don't use a cover. It doesn't need to be protected from the sunlight. You can see they've really broken this down and made this into nice castings. There's still little bits of food that they'll go through. There's plenty of worms. They're all spread out throughout. And look right here, I'm really hoping you can pick up on that. Right in between my thumbs. Right there is a worm egg, which is a good sign. It means they're happy and they're reproducing in here. I'm not seeing any dry spots. I'm not seeing any spots that are overly wet, where it's just soggy and gross. It doesn't have like a rancid smell. They're definitely breaking down the paper, so I may need to add in more paper soon. I'm not really seeing any like major chunks of food. It looks like they've eaten everything that was in here, at least a majority of it. So that means I can go ahead and feed again. I have my nice little channel right here. This morning and the last 2 mornings, went out into the vegetable garden. We picked some things. So we have some extra, or some cabbage leaves that we peeled off. We have carrot tops, I think a couple of carrots, broccoli leaves, and turnips, and maybe some beet leaves as well in this blend. We just toss it all into the blender. That way it's a really nice puree, and it makes it easier for the worms to digest. Here it is. It's just really blended up like greens from the garden. Worms don't have teeth. They have a gullet like a chicken. So that's why it's important to have grit inside of your bin, because they're going to ingest this and then they're going to use any of the grit, like grinded up eggshell or very fine sand, to grind that up inside of their gut, and that's how they'll actually process this. So I like blending it because it does make it more readily available for the worms to start eating it, versus waiting for the leaves to start to break down and then they can come through later and go through it. I take that back, it's a gizzard, not a gullet. All right, so that's it. This is all the food I'm gonna give them. It's a decent amount. I put it right here in the center because at night, keeping my worm bin inside, one of the things is it does still get cold inside of my house, and these red wigglers don't like being cold. So at night, I have seed heating mats underneath 2 bins. So it heats up and keeps them warm at night to keep them active. And the way I lay it is it runs this way through. So this will be warm, which will cause the worms to want to go to where it's warm, which will also force them to eat and process the food. Now that I've checked the bin, I am seeing the worms are happy. They're not trying to get out for some reason. I'm seeing eggs, which is a good sign that they are happy and the conditions are right because they are procreating. And I've now fed it. I can go ahead and take everything on the sides, cover it back up, and just let the worms be. And this will sit for about a week or so now. Now, if you ever do start to get a smell to your bin, it means you have too much food and the worms aren't able to process it fast enough. So what you can do is add carbon to help absorb some of that smell and help balance it out, because it's almost like a compost bin where you don't want to have only cardboard and paper, and you don't want to just put only food in here. The worms need a balance of both. What we can do to this right now is add some shredded paper to the top of this. I could wet that down a little bit, and then I could put my plastic back on top, which will help keep the humidity in, but still allow good airflow. I went and grabbed some shredded paper, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of this to the top, just a thin little layer. I don't need too much. The bin's doing fine, so I'm not adding this because it smells or anything, just to make sure I have carbon for them to eat on. I'm going to mist this down and then put the cover on top of it. All right, so here's my little mister. I'm just gonna wet this all down. Doesn't need to be extremely wet, just nice and damp. I'm gonna take the coffee filters that I have, put these back on top, just in case the worms do want any of the coffee grounds, they can come up and get it that way. For my setup, just a piece of Panda plastic, which is just white on one side, black on the other. And it's a fairly thick plastic. It's not pond liner thick, but it is more than your like grocery bag. And that's it. That's how I do my bins, keeping it simple. And as I go, they'll just fill up, and as they get higher and higher, eventually I'll get all the worms out and then take the castings, filter them. I like to put them into the garden right away, but you can cure them and keep them in like a nice closed dry bucket until you're ready to use them. So the last thing I wanted to touch on was doing the open top. I don't like putting lids on them just because of not allowing enough airflow to get into them. I do have mine in a shelf like unit I built, so the airflow is a little restricted with how I have mine set up. So I want to make sure that they can have as much airflow as possible. If I had it outside, I would probably have a cover on top because I don't want the sun to be down on this, which would cause it to dry out really fast. I would say probably within less than a week, the whole bin would be close to being dried out, and then your worms would definitely not be happy. Because I'm inside, I keep it like this. If I was outside, I would put a lid on it. I would have a lot of holes, and then I would probably still end up putting maybe like burlap over the top or some other screen material to help give it more shade, so that way it wouldn't evaporate out so fast. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll answer them as best I can. Otherwise, happy composting.